Hello everyone, I wanted to show you how to do some fire and water divination today. I really would like to do a scrying series at some point. I have so many different ideas for content and so little time, but really there's so many different ways that you can scry. You can scry into a black mirror, you can scry into obsidian, you can scry into water, and today we're going to be combining the fire element and the water element to really give a unique way to scry. So it basically involves taking a candle, you're burning a candle, and letting the wax drip into the pool of water. And I'm going to show you a demonstration today as well. This is something that's done across many different cultures across the world, and there are so many different ways to scry and interpret the candle wax. So I'm just going to be showing you what I personally do in my own magical practice. If you are someone that does this and you have your own way of interpreting things, please feel free to put it in the comment box below. Obviously, this is not going to be an exhaustive video of all the different ways that you could interpret the candle wax. I just wanted to share something from my own personal practice. So I hope you enjoyed this really fun, creative way to do divination. The first thing that I want to say about scrying in general, this is a very abstract and artistic form of divination. So the more analytical you get, typically the less you're going to get out of this. I know a lot of us are analytical thinkers, me too. When I first started scrying, it was extremely difficult for me to do that. I was overanalyzing every little thing, but if you can allow your mind to just open, free flow, go with the flow, allow images to come in and really just be more abstract about it, you're going to have a lot better of an experience. I think that's the biggest complaint that I hear from people when it comes to scrying, is that people are trying to overanalyze it too much. And when you're overanalyzing things, you're getting way too much in your conscious mind, and you're not allowing yourself to connect to your subconscious mind. You're not allowing yourself to connect to the spirit realm. So I encourage you to try not to overanalyze as you go through this process. I know it can be easier said than done. Coming from an overly analytical thinker, I totally get it. I also wanted to say that this is a really fun exercise to do with a group. So in my coven, we have done this a couple times where we all do our own water scrying with the candle wax and everything. And it's so interesting to see how different all of our readings show up. It really is different for every single person. So I'll have some pictures up on the screen so you can see what I mean about that. But it's a really fun group activity just to see how everyone's reading comes out and what people are able to get out of it. So if you have a group of friends that are interested in the magical arts, definitely try to do this together. October's coming up at the time of filming this, and this is something that is excellent to do during the season of the witch. So let me take you over to my desk. I'm going to flip the camera around. I'm going to show you the materials you need, and then we are going to do a demo, and I'm going to interpret this reading here with you. I think for today's reading, we're just going to ask for a collective reading, but I'm going to walk you through the whole process so you can see what this actually looks like. So the first thing that you're going to want to get is a large bowl, fill it up with water. I really love using this bowl because it's very shallow and wide, and those shallow wide bowls are really nice because it gives you a lot of surface area to work with. But really any bowl is going to be fine. You can even pick a bowl with a specific intention behind it, or maybe there's a color of a bowl. You know, if there's a specific color you're wanting to work with for this reading, feel free to do so. And then the next step, you want to choose your candle, and y'all better be appreciative, okay, because I am using one of my really big, nice, fancy beeswax candles for you all, because I just realized that I don't have any smaller, more disposable candles. So I'm going to be using one of my fancy ones today. This candle is actually purple. It's reading blue on camera, and I'm not really sure why, but I chose purple because purple relates to intuition, psychic abilities, the spirit realm, etc. If color magic is something you're interested in, I'll link my video down below in the description box where I talked about the biopsychology of color, because there are so many different things that relate to why colors affect us the way they do. So I will link that. But pick your candle. Really, I mean, you can choose the color that relates to whatever intention it is. If this is just a general reading, you can go with black or something like that. One recommendation I do have for you though is make sure whatever candle you're using that it is highly pigmented, because if you try doing this with a white candle, you're not going to get as good of a read because the candle wax is going to be harder to read when it hits the water. So try to pick a candle that has a lot of pigment to it. So this is like a nice bright purple, a black would be great, a blue, a green, etc. You get the point. And then other than a lighter or some way to light the candle, that's really all you need. You don't need very many tools for this whatsoever. Now, the next stage here is setting your intention. You really want to figure out what it is that you want to get out of this reading. So again, like I mentioned previously, this can just be a very generalized reading. You can simply ask your guides, what do I need to know at this point in time? Or if you want to do a reading for the year ahead, you can ask your guides, tell me what I need to know about this next year coming up. You can also do a reading about a specific situation, or if you have a specific question in mind, you know, whatever it is, you do that. And as we go through this process, I'm going to kind of film myself silently doing this, so I want to explain this ahead of time, but when you start this process of lighting the candle and allowing that candle wax to drip into the bowl of water, some people like to swirl in a clockwise motion if they're inquiring about something they want to bring into their life, or maybe if you are inquiring about something that you want to exit your life, maybe swirling in a counterclockwise motion. I don't particularly enjoy swirling because I don't want to affect the candle wax, so I just kind of allow my hand to drip the candle wax in, and if my hand moves a little bit as I go through this process, it's not really that big of a deal, but I'm not going to really be trying to move my hand, if that makes sense. I'm going to allow myself to go into an altered state of consciousness, and however my hand moves in the water is however it's supposed to move. Some people like to pay attention to potential visions that you may get during this process while you're letting the candle wax drip into the water. So part of the experience can actually be you going into this altered state of consciousness and having these images come into your mind as you're letting it drip into the water, or maybe there are some shapes that take place in the water as you're letting it drip. For me personally, I really just try to get myself into a meditative state of mind, and I don't do any reading until the very end. I wait until all the wax is in the bowl, and then I read the entire bowl together. But that's just a personal preference. Again, do what you want. So you will need some prior knowledge of meditation here, because you are going to allow yourself to slip into an altered state of consciousness. So however you like to do that, if you do body scan meditations, if you take 10 deep breaths, whatever it is to start getting yourself to relax, I like to do a little bit of chanting as well. So I will pick an intention phrase for what I want this reading to be for. And even if it's more generalized, I will say something along the lines of, tell me what I need to know, tell me what I need to know, tell me what I need to know. And I'll just chant that over and over again as I allow the candle wax to drip. Obviously, I won't chant that quickly. I'll be a lot slower with it, but you get the point. So you're relaxing, you're allowing your eyes to glaze over, you're not really thinking consciously. It can also be helpful to turn the lights off and really make this a altered state experience, but allow yourself to relax and drip it into the water. So that is what I'm going to do for you now, and then afterwards we will go to interpreting the wax. Okay, so I used about half of the candle because it was a really, really big candle. If it were just me doing this reading for myself, I would have used the full candle, but because I'm doing this for a demo, I want to save the second half of that candle for something else. So anyways, we have the candle wax in the bowl now. There are many, many different ways that you can interpret this. Some people will divide the bowl in half, and what's on the left side relates to the past, and what's on the right side relates to the future. You can also look at this like it's a clock. So if you were doing this reading, let's say you wanted to ask your guides, what do I need to know over this next upcoming year? And so you can look at it as the 12 up here, the 6 over here, the 3 over here, and the 9 over here. And you can look at it as the 12 months of the year. So wherever you have wax is going to be indicative of something happening in that particular month. So let's say you have a giant blob up at the 1 o'clock position. That would mean there's a lot of stuff going on in January. And then maybe if you have some empty space in February and March, things will be pretty uneventful, etc., etc. So you can look at it like a clock to help you determine when things are going to happen. But the first thing that I look for are just any shapes in general that I can pick out. So for me, what I'm initially seeing is some sort of creature. There's the body of the creature here, and then there's this really long tail that spins emotions around. And as I was doing this, I was actually getting images of either a snake or a dragon or a scorpion. I couldn't really figure out which one it was, and then it kind of morphed into something else, so I'm not quite sure how to receive that yet. And I was basically just doing this reading for the collective in general. What do we need to know? So thinking about the dragon, the snake, and the scorpion, there is this scary element to those images. I think a lot of people really fear those animals. However, to me, those are symbols of transformation. There is some incredible transformation happening in our collective right now. So that is how I'm choosing to interpret that. Again, you don't want to be over analytical about this. You really just want to go with what your gut, what your intuition is telling you. So after looking at the different shapes, seeing if I can make out anything, you're going to want to look for letters, maybe squares or triangles or circles. Different shapes have different symbolism. So if you see a square, for me, that typically relates to support and structure. Squares are very much about rigidity almost. So sometimes it can mean that maybe things are too rigid in your life, or maybe you're being too rigid, or maybe on the flip side, maybe you need more structure and you need more rigidity. A circle is more about flow and continuity and infinity, the cycles of the universe, the wheel of the year, things like that. And triangles for me relate to immense power. If you think of the cone of power, the triangles, or like the great pyramids of Egypt, there is so much power around a triangle. So play around with different symbols and what different symbols mean to you, because again, it's going to differ depending on who you are as a person. And then after looking at the shapes, I start looking at blobs. So I don't know how else to call them but blobs, but you essentially want to look at little blobs versus big blobs. So if you have one area that has big blobs, that is going to be an area where there is a lot of movement happening. There's a lot of things that are affecting each other, versus a little blob. You know, you see the tiny little dots over here. These can potentially indicate isolated incidents. And I want to start looking at where this is happening in my life. So this is where I consider the directions of north, east, south, and west. This part really does play a huge role in how I interpret the rest of the candle wax reading. So the north pertains to the element earth. So this is all about the material realm. It can be about finances, the home, your career, your physical material possessions, or your material place in life. It can also relate to your connection to the earth, or maybe to your ancestors. I very much relate the north to ancestors because of that earth element. And then in the east relates to the element air. So this is all about travel, new ideas, the mind, intellect. It's very much a mental space to be in. There's a lot of movement with the air element. And in the east, it is said that, you know, the sun rises in the east, so it can also represent new beginnings. So maybe the beginning of a new project or a new venture or a new path in your life. And then in the south, this relates to the element fire. So for me, the fire element is all about passion and creativity. What really drives you and fuels you. There is so much movement with the fire element. The fire element and the air element kind of have that in common. And then in the east, we have the water element. And the water element is all about emotions, the subconscious mind, illusions, even magic and mysticism. It can also relate to your personal relationships, like your interpersonal relationships, your husband, your girlfriend, your coworkers, your friends, etc. All these different relationships that you have and the emotional piece to those relationships. So depending on where you have these blobs can really kind of indicate where you have a lot of activity. And I think it's also important not just to pay attention to where the blobs are, but also pay attention to where you may have empty space or some sort of emptiness in your life. So say you have a lot of activity in the north, you have a lot going on with your material world, your possessions, your career, your finances, or maybe your connection to the earth and your ancestors. But if you don't have a lot in the south where fire is, you may be lacking in your passion and your creativity, and that's something that you might want to consider tapping into. And the same with the east and the west. If you have a lot over here in the water in west, there may be a lot of emotions going on in your life right now, or just a lot of emotional situations, a lot of situations with relationships, or maybe a lot going on in your subconscious mind. Versus the east, if there's a lot going on over here, there's a lot of movement, there's a lot of mental activity, a lot of intellect and thought processes and travel and communication communication. So again, just kind of considering where everything is as it relates to the directions and the elements can be really useful. So here for this particular reading, everything's kind of centered in the middle. So this isn't really a good reading to show you the directions because it really is right in the center. We've got this creature, this giant blob with this really long tail. It almost kind of looks like an elephant now that I'm looking at it, and then the tail looks like a snake wrapping around. I would be really curious to know your interpretations. Definitely put them down in the comments below. I have to stick with the dragon, snake, or scorpion though, because that is the image that I got as I was pouring the candle wax. So even though this is displaying something slightly different now, I think I still have to stick with that message I got of transformation. And this is very different than the reading I just did on myself previously. I feel like the reading I did for myself was, it had a lot more interesting stuff in it. It had letters and shapes and all sorts of things, but we're really kind of lacking here. There isn't too much as far as shapes go. But whatever's happening in the collective, it's big, at least according to this reading, because we don't have a bunch of medium-sized blobs in random places. We have one giant blob in the center and then this tail wrapping around the backside of it. So really there is one big thing that is going to affect many different things. So I would love to hear your interpretation in the comments below, and I hope that this has been helpful. This is one of my favorite forms of divination because it's just so fun, it's so free flow and artistic. I truly hope that you give it a try. It's good to exercise our scrying abilities because it really pushes your rational mind a little bit. So anyways, thank you so much for watching this video. I'll see you all again soon.